Welcome to Ryan's Running Reviews in partnership with Roadrunner Sports, and today we're taking a look at the brand new adidas Supernova Rise. Let's run with it. Before we get started, I do want to say that these shoes were provided to me by Roadrunner Sports. However, no one had a chance to preview this video, and the style synopsis is my own. I'd also like to say, please leave a like on the video and consider subscribing. Here we go. The adidas Supernova Rise is a max cushion neutral daily trainer that, in my opinion, I think works for those everyday runs and can pick up the pace as well if you need it for that. Now, a lot of people were very excited when they saw the announcement for this shoe because we have a new type of foam in the midsole, so let's talk about whether it's worth it or not. The stats for this shoe are nothing crazy, pretty average. It costs $140 and weighs 9.7 ounces, which isn't light, and it's definitely not heavy either. And then as far as the stack height goes, we have 34 millimeters in the heel, 24 in the forefoot for a relatively high 10 millimeter heel to toe drop. The upper is an engineered mesh, which I did find to be quite breathable, and the fit is true to size. The tongue has tons of padding to it. It's very plush and is non-gusseted. However, this was an issue for me as the edges or the sides of the tongue were quite rough. There's this kind of line of stitching down the sides of the tongue as well that created some discomfort. I really couldn't get it situated flat over the top of my foot, and as time went on with the shoe, it just became a slight irritation point, kind of ruined the upper experience because as you move towards the back of the shoe, you have tons of padding back here. It's quite comfortable, and the heel counter is quite rigid as well, which provides a good lockdown. I was really happy with the overall experience of the upper with the exception of the sides of the tongue. Hopefully they either gusset the tongue or smooth it out in future iterations because it did kind of hamper my overall experience with the upper, which I thought was quite decent. Again, just with the exception of the tongue itself being not gusseted. And now for the midsole, which really got a lot of people excited because adidas is now using a biobased foam, which they're calling Dreamstrike Plus. Piba foams are typically found on like the super race day elite running shoes just because Piba material has a little bit more energy return to it. So for adidas to put it on kind of a more conventional neutral daily trainer was a very interesting thing. Now, the green foam is Dreamstrike Plus, that Piba-based material. However, we have this kind of gray foam, which is going to be a bit more dense. And if you flip around the shoe to the outsole, you notice how these gray lines, which are basically foam rods, meant to kind of give the shoe a little bit more rigidity. However, I will say this is a fairly flexible and bendable shoe, so they don't give the shoe a whole lot of rigidity, kind of like a plate or anything like that. It's nowhere near that level of stiffness, but I'm assuming these foam rods do give you a little bit more structure than if they did not exist at all and we just had a pure Piba-based or pure Dreamstrike Plus midsole. For me personally, I did have high expectations for the Supernova Rise, mainly because of the reputation that Piba has within running shoe midsoles. And I will say after trying the shoe, I was a little bit let down. And yes, I did think that the heel area had a nice level of squish and energy return to it and was kind of the highlight of the Dreamstrike Plus experience. But as you move towards the forefoot, it felt a bit flat and wasn't as expressive or as energetic as I was hoping for. Now this may be for a couple different reasons. First, we have a 10 millimeter heel to toe drop. That's a substantial difference between the forefoot and the heel. And then the second thing is you have those gray dense foam rods that run through the outsole with a substantial amount of rubber coverage, which I do think restrict the Piba or Dreamstrike Plus foam a little bit. But otherwise, I didn't feel like the forefoot had a whole lot of energy return to it. The highlight of the shoe was mainly the midfoot and heel area. I will say most running shoes nowadays are getting thicker, softer, and bouncier, so we can kind of pair it back to something with only about 24 millimeters of stack height. It feels quite moderate, just not as fun. So if you're someone who likes a more moderately cushioned running shoe with a relatively high 10 millimeter drop, I think this may work quite well for you, but don't expect anything super energetic out of the midsole when you get towards the front. Moving on to the outsole, you do have a substantial amount of rubber coverage with the exception of the lateral part of the top of the toe, which is exposed thumb. It's rather interesting. You do have quite a bit of a bevel towards the heel area, and it is not Continental tire rubber, which I'm quite surprised by. According to adidas, it's AdiWear outsole rubber. So not sure that makes a whole lot of difference. I was quite happy with the traction, but I really would kind of stick to conventional surfaces like asphalt, concrete, or brick. So overall, at least in my opinion, I was hoping for a bit more out of the Supernova Rise. It feels like a very decent, classic, traditional neutral daily trainer, and maybe a slightly elevated version of your typical average running shoe with the Dreamstrike Plus foam, giving you a moderate amount of energy turn and squish towards the back, and at least again for me, falling a bit flat as you get towards the forefoot. Yes, you have those kind of foam gray rods that stiffen up the shoe a little bit, but otherwise I will say this is a fairly flexible and bendable trainer. At 9.7 ounces, it's about middle of the road. It's not super light and it's not heavy, and at $140, that's pretty reasonable. I will say again, relatively high heel to toe drop of 10 millimeters. So if that's something that interests you, this may be a decent option, but I do think they need to fix the tongue just because the edges of the tongue gave me a moderate amount of discomfort when wearing the shoe for long periods of time. So I think the long and short of it is this is the slightly elevated traditional neutral daily trainer that does a decent job, works at a wide variety of paces, but I think Adidas could potentially up it, maybe make the forefoot a bit more energetic or just give us a thicker midsole. I know running shoes are kind of getting thicker with every iteration, and that may be my personal bias, but that's something I'd be kind of curious to see with this particular model. Well, that concludes the review. Let me know down in the comments what you think of the Supernova series or this new Dreamstrike Plus formulation. I would love to hear from you. Well, I'm Ryan from Ryan's Running Reviews, and I'll catch you guys on the next one. Thanks.